The morning in New Orleans was draped in a fine mist, the streets lay soaked. The car lights shimmering off the mottled gray asphalt. Outside the Sports Injury Rehabilitation Center, people hurried in and out, raincoats rustling, ambulances now and then screaming their sirens. Amidst that bustle, a boy sat quietly under the eave. Malik Johnson, 10 years old, dark-skinned and lean, his sneakers torn wide open, the laces replaced with old electrical wire. In his hands he held an antiquated music box, its surface scratched and worn. Malik deftly disassembled it and listened to its vibrations, as if that were the only thing still tethering him to this world. Suddenly a sleek black Bentley rolled to a stop. A tall white man descended from the vehicle, his face etched with fatigue and arrogance. Richard Davenport, real estate mogul, one of the wealthiest men in the city. Behind him, someone gently pushed a wheelchair. In it sat Ethan Davenport, 12 years old, his face bright but his eyes heavy with sadness, his legs immobilized after the accident that once shook the entire city with grief. Richard bent low, silently pushing his son into the center as though the rest of the world was unworthy of his notice. But at that moment, Malik sprang to his feet. His voice rang out clear, without tremor, without pleading. "Sir, I can make your son run again." Richard halted, his cold eyes drilled into the boy. Passers-by stopped in their tracks, a few cast astonished or mocking glances at Malik. A street kid, in tattered clothes, daring to say something that even the world's top doctors might declare impossible? Yet Malik's gaze did not waver. No mockery, no despair, only absolute faith. In that moment time seemed to freeze. On one side, a powerful billionaire, on the other, a homeless street boy, and between them, that declaration, like a thunderclap, launching a story none could foresee. Malik Johnson was born in a working-class neighborhood by the Mississippi River. His father died early in an accident, leaving mother and son to scrape by. Malik's mother, Angela, was both a musician and a sound therapist. She often told her son, "Music is not just to be heard. My child, it can awaken the body's memory. It can pull back what people think was lost." Malik's childhood drifted by with an old piano and handcrafted hand drums. Then a terrible illness claimed his mother, leaving Malik adrift in the world. With no family, no home, he wandered, nights spent sheltering in abandoned warehouses, days sitting in front of the Sports Injury Rehabilitation Center. There Malik watched doctors, observed every therapy, committed it all to his exceptional memory, and the single precious thing he carried was his mother's music box, a keepsake filled with love and the belief that music could heal. In stark contrast stood Richard Davenport. He embodied power, wealthy, cold, controlling everything with money. People respected him, some even feared him, but few knew he was torn by deep guilt. He was the one driving the car on that fateful rainy night, the accident that crippled his son. Since that day, Richard placed absolute faith in medicine, doctors, and the most expensive treatments, never once imagining that a homeless child might hold the key to his son's recovery. Between those two opposing worlds sat Ethan Davenport, once a rising star in youth basketball. He was full of life, but after the accident, his paralyzed legs turned him inward. Long days on his wheelchair made him quiet, dispirited, quick to anger, yet deep in his eyes still lingered a spark, the longing to run. Once more, the collision of these three fates, a homeless boy who believes in rhythm, a tormented father wielding control, and a child who has lost hope, planted the seed for a journey no one expected. Richard looked at Malik with a mixture of anger and contempt. He was used to people following his family to beg or exploit. To him, this ragged boy was no different from a petty scammer. But Ethan was different. The boy in the wheelchair would not take his eyes off Malik. For the first time in a long while, a flicker of light appeared in those eyes, something Richard had not seen since the accident. His son's silence made Richard hesitate. Then, for the first time in months, Ethan spoke. "Dad, let him try." That sentence made Richard freeze. After a moment's hesitation, he exhaled sharply. nodded, though his voice remained stern. "Fine, but only once, and if anything happens, do not ever come near my son again." The setting for the first trial was not a modern lab, not a polished hospital. It was an abandoned warehouse near the park, where Malik often took refuge. The walls were peeling, the concrete floor cold, the smell of damp mold drifting. In that space, Malik began to prepare, modestly but with focused intent. He placed the old music box on the ground, turned it gently, listening to metal parts clink. Then he tapped a rhythm with his hand. To Malik, it was not just sound, it was living beat. He used whatever he had: a worn rubber band to help stabilize Ethan's leg muscles, a hot water bottle wrapped in fabric to warm tissues. As he worked, Malik continued tapping rhythm, guiding Ethan to breathe and to move in time. At first, Ethan furrowed his brow, annoyed, even sneered. "My legs are dead, your music cannot change anything." But a few minutes later, silence fell. Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. The foot that had long been numb stirred slightly, as if responding to the beat, a sensation Ethan thought he would never feel again. A real smile, a true smile, spread across Ethan's face. Malik smiled along, continuing the rhythm, as if awakening something buried deep in the child's body over many months. Richard stood there, fists clenched. Inside him turmoil churned, but he could not deny one truth: something was genuinely happening before his eyes. In the days that followed, Richard remained skeptical, but it was Ethan who pleaded to return to the old warehouse. And so, each evening, as the misty rain fell outside, that cold, empty space echoed with the steady rhythm of the music box. Strangely enough, Ethan was truly improving. At first, he could only feel pressure in his toes. Then, he managed to lightly flex his feet. And one evening, when Malik gently increased the tempo, Ethan trembled, but succeeded in lifting his knee off the wheelchair. For the first time, Richard's eyes that once believed only money and science held power, flickered with disbelief. Yet he still refused to accept it. One thought echoed in his mind: false hope is crueler than despair. And then the conflict erupted. One day, the exercise became too hard. Ethan screamed, slamming the music box onto the concrete. It shattered. The sound of metal crashing echoed through the warehouse. Then silence, thick, suffocating silence. Malik said nothing. He quietly picked up the broken pieces, his eyes filled with a sorrow that ran deep. Seeing that look, Ethan broke down in tears. Malik sat beside him and whispered, "My mom used to say, music never dies. Even when it's shattered into 100 pieces, if we still listen, the rhythm lives on." Ethan clenched his fists, holding onto that fragile thread of belief. But Richard was different. He finally lost it, shouting, "Enough! I will not let my son become some joke. Listen to me. This boy cannot save you. This is nothing but delusion." For the first time, Ethan cried openly in front of his father, yelling back, "You do not understand. I want to try, because he believes in me." The room went completely still. Richard stood there, hands trembling, his heart aching. He realized he was no longer his son's source of strength. The boy who once admired him now found courage in a street kid. After that night, Richard stopped interfering. He never spoke words of approval, but silently began to participate. Sometimes he would help support his son during Malik's sessions. Other times, he would just sit quietly in the corner, listening to the rhythm echo around him. Word began to spread about Ethan and the boy with the music box. Other families began to show up, hoping Malik could help their children too. And it was then that Richard Davenport, the man who once looked down on Malik, began to see a truth: that power, money, and modern hospitals could not deliver what a homeless child with a broken music box had achieved. A truth that unraveled his entire worldview. That day, the skies over New Orleans were unusually clear after weeks of rain. In the city's Central Park, a small stage had been set up for a community event. News of the boy with the music box had spread far and wide, and the crowd gathered thick, buzzing with anticipation. In the front row, Ethan sat in his wheelchair, clutching the music box Malik had patiently repaired after the night it broke. Beside him, Richard wore a dark suit, but his expression had changed completely, no longer full of arrogance, but a mix of anxious hope and unnameable fear. Malik stepped into the center of the circle of onlookers. He placed the music box on the ground, took a deep breath, and began tapping. The rhythm echoed, pulsing like a heartbeat. Other children in the crowd began clapping along, forming a warm, living circle of sound around Ethan. Richard leaned down, placing his hand on his son's shoulder, and whispered, "You can stop at any time. I won't push you." Ethan shook his head. Sweat was already forming on his brow. As Malik gradually increased the tempo, the boy trembled, then gripped his father's arm and pulled himself upright. The crowd held its breath. One step, his legs shook violently, but he did not fall. 2 steps, the crowd erupted like thunder. And then, a 3rd step. For the first time since the accident, Ethan walked on his own, in front of hundreds of witnesses. Tears poured down his face as he shouted, "I can run again, Dad, I can run again." Richard collapsed beside his son, wrapping him in a tight embrace. Tears rolled down the face that once seemed carved from stone. The man whispered hoarsely to Malik, "I am sorry for not believing. You have done what the whole world could not." The crowd exploded in cheers, but in the middle of all the noise, Malik simply looked at Ethan and smiled. To him, the victory was not about glory, it was about watching someone rediscover belief in their own legs. And the truth was undeniable now. Not a famous doctor, not a luxury hospital, but a homeless boy with an old music box had delivered a miracle. After that day, Malik's life turned a new page. Richard Davenport, once cold and proud, now reached out with open arms. He brought Malik into his home, gave him a real place to belong, and helped him return to school. But more than that, Richard gave Malik the chance to nurture his dream of becoming a music therapist. Carrying on his late mother's legacy, Ethan not only recovered physically, his spirit came alive again. No longer the withdrawn boy in a wheelchair, he became Malik's partner. 2 children, once from opposite worlds, now walked side by side, building healing sessions for other injured children. The park, once quiet, now became a weekend gathering place. Malik stood at the center of a circle of kids, tapping rhythm on the old music box. Every sound was more than music, it was a heartbeat of hope, rippling through every young soul. The media called him the boy with the healing rhythm. If you ever thought you were too small to make a difference, remember Malik. The homeless boy, with an old music box, helped others stand when the world had given up on them. Share this story, so forgotten children everywhere know they still matter and they can change the world.